These tram-styled buses from China are now appearing quite often in the news. Apart from China itself, they are already in service in Campeche, Mexico, they are being tested in Pakistan, Malaysia and Brazil, and some other countries are just starting to take a closer look at them. So, in short, this is no longer just a local Chinese story, and it seems we should talk about them in more detail to figure out what they really are, a pointless gadget ban or a really useful form of public transportation. And the first problem lies in the name itself. Officially, it is called Autonomous Rail Rapid Transit, and that sounds like a pretty shameless gaslighting. Can you see any rails here? No? Well, me neither. As for autonomy, it also looks more like wishful thinking. These vehicles do use sensors to follow special markings or magnetic markers on the road, but there is still a steering wheel in the cab and a driver controlling the movement. In other words, the electronics only assist the driver but don't replace them, which means that according to the automatic train operation classification, this system falls at most into the Go-Away 1 category. So there is no true autonomy here either. This system is also called a trackless tram, although for me that sounds just as strange as a wingless plane. So basically, if we set aside all the marketing tricks and call things by their proper names, we have a very long electric bus with driver assistance features and a tram-like design. To keep it short, I think we could call it a smart bus. That sounds pretty innovative as well. So, what are the benefits of these smart buses? The main benefit, which is always mentioned first, is the low cost and easiness of implementation. Apparently, we don't need to lay tracks or install overhead wires, so it should be much cheaper and simpler than building a tram line. At first glance, it sounds quite logical and very promising. We spend less and get almost a tram line, a total win-win. But until recently, it was hard to check this, as all such systems operated in China, which is hardly a model of transparency. But then such a route began operating in Campeche, Mexico, and we can find some interesting information about it. They built a 15.2-kilometer line there, and it cost 4.2 billion pesos, which is roughly equal to $233 million or 199 million euros, including 5 buses and a depot, which means the line cost an average of 13 million euros per kilometer. So, is that expensive? Of course, if we compare this to prices in the US or Canada, it's very cheap, although almost everything is cheap compared to the US and Canada. So let's compare it to the European Union. For example, a new tram line has recently been opened in Strasbourg, France, costed an average of 30.5 million euros per kilometer. But in countries like Poland or Finland, new tram lines can be built for as much as 10 to 15 million euros per kilometer, and if you look, you can find even more affordable examples. In other words, for the same amount of money or even less, it is quite realistic to build a full-fledged tram line. So it turns out that smart buses aren't as cheap as they say. But maybe that's quick to implement. The system in Campeche was completed in 15 months. That's certainly not 2 or 3 weeks, but it's still pretty fast, I would say. For example, the 25-kilometer Jokery line in Helsinki took 4 years to build, and the 12.5-kilometer Metro Tranvía system in Mendoza, Argentina took 3. So I suppose we can agree that it is indeed possible to launch such a system faster. Although this also depends heavily on the specifics of a particular country. In some places a tram can be built quickly, while in others even a simpler project can drag on for a decade. However, I don't think this is such a significant advantage, considering that we are talking about infrastructure that will be used for many years. So as for me, it is better to build it over a longer period, but make it more reliable and efficient on the long run rather than quickly but with issues in the future. Also, thanks to their two-cab design, they can have terminal stops without turning loops, which is convenient on narrow streets. Regular buses can't do this, so it's really a notable feature. And now let's move on to the downsides. In lane following mode, these megabuses, just like trams, must always follow a fixed path, but at the same time they drive on a regular road where their wheels will constantly press down the same area, causing rapid damage and ruts. So instead of pre-launch costs, cities will have to spend money on repaving the streets afterwards. Of course, regular buses also wear down the road surface, but because they are driven by humans, they follow a slightly different path each time, a bit to the left or right, so the load on the road is distributed more evenly. By the way, you may have noticed that in many cities, bus stops for regular buses have reinforced surfaces usually made of concrete, even though the surrounding street is paved with asphalt. And this is because when pulling into a stop, buses always follow the same trace and wear down the pavement heavily, so it's better to make it more durable. If only there was a way to make heavy vehicles drive on more wear-resistant surfaces. But wait. Guided buses would likely require the road to be reinforced along the entire route. That would mean costly construction work, removing the main benefit of the system, being cheap and easy to implement. So if we want reliability, we'll still have to shut down the street and do a lot of construction work. And at that point, you have to wonder, why not just build a tramline instead? By the way, the same thing happened with the Translohr system. The idea was simple: put the tram on rubber tires, guided with a single central rail, and save money compared to a conventional tram, cause one rail should cost less than two. That sounds quite logical, right? But things didn't work out that way. The asphalt under the vehicles deteriorated quickly, so cities ended up having to build a dedicated concrete track anyway. And once they did, the cost was almost the same as building a regular tramline. Bus rides are usually bumpier than tram rides, and in this case there is also a risk that the road surface could be in even worse condition. As a result, this system is likely to be less comfortable for passengers than a conventional tram, and that's the kind of difference passengers will feel with their own backsides. But a much bigger problem is that these smart buses are offered by only one manufacturer, and by choosing such a system, the city essentially becomes dependent on it. In this situation, it is in the manufacturer's best interest to initially offer cities attractive prices at the beginning and then cover its costs through maintenance and the sale of spare parts. Once everything is up and running, the city will simply have nowhere to escape. Don't like the deal, you can refuse to pay, and your innovative technology will very quickly end up in a junkyard. Feel free to complain to the United Nations. And even at the very beginning, you won't be able to hold a tender and choose a more favorable offer, cause there is only one manufacturer and no one to compete with. With classic trams or trolleybuses, the situation is entirely different. This is a highly competitive market where you can always choose the most profitable offer among different producers, and if you are not satisfied with the quality of one manufacturer, you can always switch to another. For example, you can launch the system with Alstom and then buy rolling stock from Kauf, Stadler, Pessa or someone else, while with the Chinese smart buses that trick won't work. Another concern is the reliability of the autonomous mode. Of course, fully automated metro systems are already common around the world, but they operate on dedicated tracks that clearly define their route. And more importantly, metro trains don't have to deal with cars, cyclists or pedestrians, which makes automated operation much easier. Essentially, it all comes down to controlling acceleration and braking and opening doors with as few surprises as possible. But with driverless buses, things get a lot more complicated. They have to navigate normal roads and intersections surrounded by thousands of cars, pedestrians, and other potential obstacles. What happens if a car suddenly pulls in front of the bus or a pedestrian unexpectedly steps into the road? Could the system make a mistake and react in a dangerous way? How reliable will the autopilot be when road markings are difficult to see, for example in winter when they are covered with snow. Videos of autopilot mistakes in passenger cars are easy to find online, but on a bus carrying hundreds of passengers, the consequences of such a mistake could be much worse. Most likely, in such situations, the bus will simply be driven by a human driver, which, by the way, can be seen in some videos from China where drivers are shown steering the wheel at the intersections. In every photo I found, these smart buses have 3 sections and are about 30 meters long. Some sources say a 4-section version is possible, but I couldn't find a single picture of one. I also haven't found any examples of these buses being coupled together like trams, so it seems that 30 meters is about as long as they can get, and that's not much longer than a typical 3-section bus or trolleybus. There are also questions about energy efficiency. Rubber tires rolling on asphalt create significantly more rolling resistance than a tram's steel wheels running on rails, and as a result, a bus is likely to consume more energy per passenger than a tram of a comparable size. Energy efficiency is also reduced by the fact that they run on batteries. The bus has to carry their weight everywhere it goes, and some energy is inevitably lost during charging. And by the way, I'm surprised that they weren't equipped with a trolleybus overhead contact line. So, in the end, the downsides of smart buses seem to outweigh their upsides. But if that's the case, why is anyone buying them at all? Chinese cities are probably using them mainly to showcase a new technology, to prove that it exists and that it actually works in the real world. But why would cities in Mexico, Pakistan, or somewhere else be interested in them? To answer this question, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the imaginary mayor of the imaginary city and see how he might look at the problem. So, here we have our wonderful mayor. He's been running the city for a few years now, and the next election is just around the corner. Unfortunately for him, his track record isn't impressive. Voters are dissatisfied, his approval ratings are going down, and his opponents never miss a chance to attack him. But he really wants to get re-elected, so he hires advisors to help improve his image and boost his ratings. And they say that to make things better, he really needs some kind of bold move. Something that would be featured on all the news and posted all over the Instagram stories. Something modern and futuristic, so he can say, "Look how progressive I am, vote for me." And by the way, he really needs to finally do something about traffic, because these traffic jams are driving everyone crazy. But a metro would be nice, but there is one problem: it's too expensive. The city simply doesn't have that kind of money, and on top of that, it takes years to build. A tram is cheaper, of course, but designing the line and building the tracks also takes time, and there is only 1 year left until the election. Oh, we won't make it in time. So, is everything really that hopeless? And then one day his advisors come to him with wonderful news. There is a fantastic option that everyone will love. It looks like a tram, but it doesn't need tracks, so it can be rolled out much faster and at a lower cost than trams or metro. We'll make it just in time to cut the ribbon before the election. Plus, just look how modern this technology looks. This will be a really powerful move. Really powerful and innovative. People are definitely gonna love it. Just sign a contract with this company and they'll take care of everything for you. No worries at all. Everyone is completely sold on the idea. The only exception is a representative from the transportation department who was accidentally sent to the meeting in place of his boss, and he decides to ask a few technical questions. Excuse me, but what about the operating costs? Does this system fully comply with our national standards, and has it actually been used anywhere else? For a moment the room falls silent, and then the mayor finally speaks. Listen, we are talking about the election here. The election. Do you understand how important that is? We'll sort out all those little technical details later with the help of our trusted partners. And now, where do I sign? As they say, all characters in this story are fictional and any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental, but I think you've got the idea. In essence, smart buses are trying to be something they're not, and in my opinion, they are especially appealing to cities that, for whatever reason, have failed to take a systematic approach to public transport, but still want to appear as though they are achieving great results without putting in the hard work. And to be honest, it's a bit like a cargo cult. Of course, these buses are no substitute for trams. Maybe they can serve as a stepping stone between buses and trams, although I'm not entirely sure why. But in general, they are just buses on steroids. So it's not the future of public transport, it's a way to meet political deadlines.